Now we have got the notice to start. So we will start this session, which is around the issue of impunity, poverty, and also connecting it also the COVID-19. We have 5 speakers. One has not joined yet. We have ChrisBiantoro from Indonesia. He will speak on the Indonesian experience. Then we have Zaman, Mr. Ashrafman from Bangladesh. He will speak about the experiences there. We have Nepal, Prakash Mohara, and he will speak on the unique Nepalese problems. We have also a speaker to join from on India, Mr. Avinash Pandey. He has not joined yet. So this particular theme we are going to introduce in a completely new way than it has been done in the past by many organizations. We have been told that we have nearly about 2 hours. So that's good, because earlier we thought it was only 1 hour. So that helps us to put our perspectives further. The procedure we will follow is that I will make the first introduction to the theme. Then Chris will speak from Indonesia. Saman will speak, and then from Nepal and India, and I will again speak on Sri Lanka. Thereafter, we will pose questions to the speakers, some questions in order to clarify some things. Further to that, there will be a time for anyone to raise questions from the audience. So the first issue that we are going to discuss is how to understand the impunity issue. You know, impunity means that you violate human rights in a very serious way, but nobody does anything to get the perpetrators brought before the law and to punish them. So it's a violation of human rights without consequences. Now the question is, this is a common problem known everywhere. Why is it that after year talking about impunity for decades now, things have become worse and not good for most countries? Of course, in this, South Korea is an exception. The conditions they have had before 1990s have been changed by the involvement of people themselves, by their struggles, and also political and other reforms. That is not the story of the other countries in South Asia and Southeast Asia. There, things have gone worse. So then we have to ask, why is it that despite of all kinds of speeches, we don't make progress? In this, perhaps for the first time in this type of conference, we are posing a question not only to the governments, but also to the international community dealing with human rights. Our question is, have you ever examined why, despite of many years of human, from 1948 is a very long time, despite of all this time of work on human rights, human rights have degenerated in developing countries, most developing countries. Why is this happening, and is there some kind of a attempt to understand this and change the course of events? Or are we going to do the same thing over and over again, and another 10 years time come back and complain that the things were even worse? So we believe that the problem is not only with governments, but the way we have been doing human rights in developing countries. We have tried to follow models which are developed in countries where for many centuries, very strong institutions have been developed in order to protect human rights and also protect people. That has been a very long struggle in their countries, and that is really the heart of the problems of civilization. Democracy, rule of law, all these things were developed in that context, and that has become part of their civilization. But these have never become part of the civilizations of South Asia or Southeast Asia or most of the developing countries. So we are borrowing models from other countries without considering local realities of how to overcome the problems we have on the ground. Let me give an example. We say that the torture should be stopped, and we all agree on that. But the policing systems of our countries are being authorized, not only authorized, depends on torture, and that is where their way of doing criminal justice. And this is not, the torture is often understood as military torture or a political torture, that when there's a very authoritarian government, they will torture the dissenters. But that is not what we know as a reality. Every day, even if you go for a case on petty theft or anything like that, the police, first thing is begin with is by torturing people. Now, we have never addressed this question in that way. We give some advice to the same government that is advising the police to use torture and tell the government, please stop torture. So what does the government do? Government turn back to the UN and say, yes, we will tell them stop torture. And then they will write a nice report and send to the UN Human Rights Council or CAT committee or UN rapporteur saying that, yes, we have taken your recommendations, we will do it. And then turn back to the police and say, just ignore all these things. These are things that we have got to say. You carry on business as it is. Because if they really want to police stop torturing, then the policing system has to change. There has to be more competent people put into investigation of crimes. They have to be trained to be professional, and the way all the things that goes with professional way of doing policing has to be introduced. And when that is not done, they must do it in the way they know how. So what they know how is that they will torture, they will kill there will be extrajudicial killings, there will be massive levels of disappearances. You will hear about from different countries. There will be unqualified judges, and there will also be judges who take bribes. And there is a wholesale denial of fair trial and all kinds of problems which make the life of an ordinary citizen a nightmare. But the global human rights community is failing to recognize this fact. Unfortunately, the global human rights community recognizes facts only when things become a huge tragedies. now and then there will be an overwhelming level of human rights violation in some place, and then the international community will say some things and sometimes will try to do something. And when that big crisis passes away, their interest also passes away. But these big crises come only because when things could have been prevented, it had not been prevented. Now that's the issue we are raising. We are able to prevent a large amount of human rights violations in the continents we are living. But somehow we have not found the way. International community has not found the way, and the local human rights civil society organizations, NGOs, have also not found the way. But at least the question must be posed, and that is what we are going to do during this meeting. We will try to provide you as much the input as possible to register this problem in your head. Only way to honor those who died for democracy, like the May 18th people who gave their life for democracy, is to be serious about democracy, to be serious about rule of law. We should not make ceremonies out of the past and just to get away that day and then carry on as usual. So let us, in that spirit, let us have this discussion, and as we go along, we will discuss a number of things. So first of all, I will call on ChrisBiantoro, well-known human rights activist who has developed over nearly about 30 years of his life and being involved in all the big struggles on human rights in Indonesia, very knowledgeable about his country and its problems. So we call upon to make his presentation first. He will have about 10 minutes, but later he will have more time in later.
Thank you very much, Mr. Basil. Thank you very much, all audience, especially to the May 18 Foundation. Thank you for this opportunity. And I would like to also to congratulate for the commemoration of May 18 Gwangju. My respect to all people, all victims, and all family of victims who involved in the May 18 Gwangju at the time. So the spirit of May 18 now has become a significant legacy to our respective countries. So thank you. I would like to start my presentations. Well, as Mr. Basil mentioned about the impunity, I would like also to highlight my presentation about the impunity and relation with the COVID-19 in Indonesia, especially. As today, the government announced that we have 1,074 cases of COVID-19 and more than 45,000 people dead in Indonesia, and 1,600,000 people recover. So I would like to flashback in the beginning when COVID-19 hit Indonesia in May 2020. At the time, the government did not prepare anything. Even at the time, the government of Indonesia still support the tourism in some part of Indonesia like Bali, Yogyakarta, etc. We still open our international flights. And what happened in Indonesia at the time, the number of cases of coronavirus increased significantly day by day. And in 2021, now we have more than 1 million cases of coronavirus. Actually, we do believe that the cases can be bigger, the number in terms of the number, yeah, because lack of coronavirus testing in Indonesia, and also the testing of the virus is only reached the middle up and also rich people, but people in the remote area, in the remote, let's say like East Indonesia, like in Papua, Moluccas, etc. We do believe that they also suffer from, COVID-19. And this situation actually has become sort of wake-up call for Indonesia, that now we are aware that our economic foundation, economic system, is very weak. Law enforcement, rule of law is also very weak. If we compare before COVID-19 hit Indonesia, at the time, since political reform in 1998, the government at the time promised to solve human rights abuses, including past human rights abuses which occurred under Suharto. But more than 20 years political reform, none of the gross violation of human rights occurred under Suharto has been resolved by the governments. So victims, family of victims now is getting old, they are sick, and also many of them still disappeared, dead, and also live under serious poverty. So the important message of the COVID-19 in this current situation is that the government of Indonesia doesn't have a special policy or special treatment how to protect and how to deal with the family and also victim of human rights violation in Aceh and also other provinces until Papua. Well, the governments treat them as ordinary, the same way as ordinary poor people. They provide monthly logistic aid and also fresh money, but the fresh money is not really, helpful because the amount is it's not really big. It's only enough to feed a small family half month. And well, in the beginning of this year, we aware that Indonesia has very serious case when the Minister of Social Affairs received bribery from the vendors of the logistic aid. The amount of money, approximately 582,020 US dollar. That is the amount of bribery. And now the Minister of Social Affairs already detained under the detention of Corruption Eradication Commission. This is the picture of, despite we don't have clear policy, the government also violate the law. So now many people in Indonesia, especially victim and also family of victim of human rights violation and also justice seeker, now we are facing uncertain situation, uncertain policy. As I mentioned in my paper, that the Minister of Law and Human Rights in the beginning of COVID-19 hit Indonesia, at the time the Minister of Law and Human Rights released 30,000 of prisoners, most of them from ordinary crimes. The minister said that this policy to support or to stop transmission of COVID-19. Well, 30,000 already released, 30,000 prisoner, but what happened? On the other hand, the police still arrest and detain, even not only the police, but also the prosecutor, they still arrest and also detain opponent groups, social and human rights activists, as well as I mentioned in my paper, like Jering, the musician of local group music in Bali. He strongly criticized against the government who failed handle the COVID-19, but now he he detained under the state detention, and now he tried to to appeal the case in the High Court. Not only Jering, but also other social activists and even the leader of religion group like Rizik Sihab and also some other religions leader. The message of my presentation is that now during the COVID-19, during the pandemic time, now the situation is worsening. we don't have, let's say, like, there is no strong policy on human rights. All of the cases of human rights abuses now stagnant, and the government also doesn't really have political will, yeah, to reform the law. As we already mentioned in many occasions, in the online discussion, offline discussion, publication through AHRC as well, that we need to reform the law as well, because now I would like to point the law, the criminal procedure, yeah, the criminal procedure that provide pre-trial detention. It is become serious problem in Indonesia, that the police, the attorney, the district court, high court, they have authority to detain suspect, to detain defendants. And what happened? This mechanism under the criminal procedure law has contributed significantly to the case of torture, unfair trial, and also other human rights violation in Indonesia. So it is still happening in Indonesia, even though the government released 30,000 prisoners, but the pre-trial detention is still applied. And I also highlight some cases in my paper that the police committed torture to death in Kalimantan, in one of the police office in Kalimantan, South Kalimantan. Yeah, the police torture to death a suspect who allegedly stole a mobile phone. So it is happening under the COVID pandemic situation. So, and also not only the ordinary crimes, the police also allegedly involved in the brutal attack against journalists in East Java province, where I also with a local network active to advocate and also monitor the progress of the case. Just 2 weeks ago, because of strong pressure from the public and also civil society, finally the Surabaya police office named 2 people as a suspect related with the case of brutal attacks against journalists. So this is happening in Indonesia. Impunity is still there. People, former military general, former high police ranking officer who allegedly involved in the past crimes now enjoy impunity. Pre-trial detention is still applied. No, I mean the law reform is moving very slow. Uncertain policy how to deal with the pandemic situation. No, there is no let's say like special treatment to the victim and family of victims who are now living in, most of them living in serious economic problem and also poverty. People in Aceh, they lost their land. 1965 people are victim of 1965 massacre. They lost their father, son. Now they are living in the serious poverty. They don't have land. Many of them now become small scale farmer. They don't have fixed income. So this situation is worsening, and we don't know the pandemic when the pandemic will end. But we also don't know what the government will do to fix this situation, Mr. Basil. So that is the point that I would like to present today. I think I already covered the point of my paper, and also I try my best to link the impunity, uncertain policy, and the COVID-19 situation, and lack of protection to the victim and family of victim of human rights violation. Thank you very much, Mr. Basil, Fernando,
we'll
and
get back
others.
to you with some questions a little later.
Okay, Mr. Basil.
Okay, Zaman, Mr. Mohammed Ashrafman from Bangladesh. He has also been involved in human rights for a long period of time. So he is quite knowledgeable about his country and also his problems. So now it's open for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Basil Fernando, for the kind introduction. First of all, I want to pay tribute to the heroes of the Gwangju uprising, who sacrificed their lives, and as a result of many like them, we have got a Korea that we enjoy today, having functional democracy, having rule of law, and a high degree of respect for human rights. So with that note, I would like to begin. The paper that I have prepared, I put a title that how collapse, institutions and impunity lead to poverty. So at this point of time, like May 2018, many people, many governments in the developing countries, they try to take the advantage of blaming COVID or using COVID-19 as an excuse of many of the problems the country is facing. In this paper, I tried to focus on what was the situation of poverty or the economic growth before COVID began in Bangladesh. And then the type of the narrative that is accepted by international organizations like World Bank and Asian Development Bank in terms of the country's economy and poverty profile, with some data in the paper and with the sources that are linked to the information that I have used in it. So when the May 18 Memorial Foundation shares this document with the audience, I hope they will have a bigger, details, which I, being mindful to the time constraint today, I will not explain each of the data that is used. But very briefly, that one narrative that we often get from the Bangladeshi government, and which is also endorsed by its development partners, that Bangladesh is making a very dynamic economic progress, quote unquote economic progress. And they use the GDP percentage, which is around 6.9 in an average for about a decade. And with that, they claim the success that the country is moving on the right track, and it has made amazing improvements in terms of poverty eradication and at the same time economic growth. So keeping that in mind, if we just briefly see that Bangladesh's per capita GDP in 2018 was US dollar 1,698.35. That was provided by World Bank. And the growth rate was 6.73%. And the same year, the country's per capita debt, loan, it remained US dollar 585 million, 585 per individual. So in that case, if we compare, the picture of per capita debt and the per capita income, then there should be still a surplus of 1,113.35 US dollars. And that should reflect in the life of the people on the ground. But the reality is it doesn't match. The people's life, the way they live, the way they suffer, and way they face the problems, it doesn't indicate that life is smooth to the extent having over $1,000 per capita income and the kind of benefits that they deserve to enjoy. And the country's loans are ever growing at the moment from various international creditors and individual countries. Then I have put a note here that we also need to look from the perspective of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is expected to be achieved by 2030 as the UN Agenda 2030. And most of the nations, I mean, they have agreed it, including Bangladesh. So in that, it shows a different a picture that in Bangladesh, for the goal number 1, which is zero hunger by 2030, the prevalence of undernourishment from 2017 to 2019 was 13%. And we have to be mindful that Bangladesh has 162 million people, the official figure. The actual census is due this year, so we don't know yet. It is 10 years ago, the census information. So out of that, if 13% remains undernourishment, then the figure is pretty high. On the other hand, the malnutrition among children under 5 years of age is 8.4%. So I have used the screenshot that is as I use the data of Asian Development Bank, so you can find it in the material once you receive it, and if you have already received it. Then the second goal is zero. Excuse me. Oh, the first one, my apologies, it is no poverty by 2030. And then the level of populations, the poverty is in an average 20.5% by 2019. Again, this is the Asian Development Bank's data. And the purchasing power parity of the population, which is below US dollar 1.9, is 14.3%. So when more than 20% population of 160 plus million people remains below the poverty line, then we also see a big picture of the poverty in the country. And the third one that I have is, I did not go to all the 17 goals of the SDG, but the third one that I have picked up here is goal number 8, which is decent work and economic growth. And here it shows that unemployment rate is 5.3%, which is in a very conservative figure. The actual figure that NGOs have done in the past, that was a little more higher than, I mean, much higher than this figure. But yes, I have taken the conservative figure because this is provided by Asian Development Bank. And the female unemployment rate is more than 1% higher than the male, which is 6.6% in the country as of 2019. And then half of the country's population do not participate in any kind of formal financial transaction. So for example, they don't have bank accounts or that sort of activity at all in their entire life. So that also indicates the kind of, if they had a decent work arrangement, employment arrangement, then there should have been formal transaction opportunities available for them. So this also indicates that half of the population is still out of the, formal type of employment in the country. So with that, then I would now, to make things a little bit more easy to understand, there is a very recent survey conducted by a regional organization, which is called South Asian Network on Economic Modeling, SANEM. So they published a report in early this year, in January. So I just quoted their data from the report, is that the percentage of population living below the poverty line, upper poverty line, has nearly doubled from 21.6% in 2018, when we did not have COVID-19 in the world. And in 2020, the percentage rose up to 42. So from 21.6 to by the end of 2020, Bangladesh's poverty level was 42%. So again, we need to see the picture: 162 million people, and then 42% are below the poverty line according to the national standard. It's not somebody made anything. What Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics and the government has determined as the poverty line, they are talking about that figure. And then there are different groups of population, urban, rural. I'm not going into the details of that. And one of the significant aspect is that 58% of the people who have fallen into extreme poor households, they have lost their ability, I mean, per capita education ability in terms of expenditure, affording the expenditure during the pandemic. So that can also give a picture of how the education is going on in the country. All the academic institutions are shut down, and the physical classes, but the online participation of the students, that has fallen 58%, have the accessibility.
Okay, try to conclude.
Yes. So, and then I come to the discussion of how impunity takes place. The much of this resource, one of these is when the country claims that it has nearly 7%, 6.9% GDP growth rate, but this trend of information that when the more than half of the population cannot afford the educational access through online during the COVID, and the unemployment rate and other problems, then the first question comes that where does the money go? The assets and the resources go. So the resources that I used a case study that it is basically laundered and embezzled through corruption. So one example that I used, a pro-government, is highly connected to the powerful politicians, including the Prime Minister. They have invested 553 million Singapore dollar to purchase 3 hotels and commercial buildings in Singapore between 2014 to 2019. And that money has not been transferred formally according to the Bangladeshi legislation, that it doesn't take permission from the state bank and many other things. The officials of the country have clearly spoken it in public that they did not do that, but nothing happened to them. And then at the same time, the government backed the same group to implement a project, power plant, which is funded by Chinese government. And there have been more than a dozen people killed extrajudicially by the police because the workers demanded better working facilities, their overdue wages, and some working condition improvement. So, instead of providing them what they need, which is part of the SDG goal 8, the police basically took the side of the financial elite, which has a strong privileged connection with the ruling elites, and then killed the poor workers. So I would come to the conclusion now. So this is how the criminal justice institutions, particularly the police, the prosecution, and the adjudication system, they all side with the people who are privileged, who are powerful, and then these institutions systematically, in an institutionalized fashion, they guarantee impunity to the perpetrators. Either the perpetrators are from the law enforcement agencies or intelligence agencies, and for whichever crime they commit, either it is gross human rights abuses like torture, extrajudicial execution, enforced disappearance, as Mr. Fernando has, in his introductory speech mentioned, and then also the financial crimes that I have shown here. So the overall system that helps to guarantee impunity and that ultimately contributes to increased poverty in the country. And here is the challenge of achieving the sustainable development goal by 2030, when the country's picture, of poverty, employment, and economic growth is such, and at the same time, the institutions are broken. And it facilitates the impunity in the jurisdiction.
Okay, we will get back to you. We'll get back to you with some questions later. Now we have from Nepal, Prakash Mohara. Prakash Mohara has also been involved in human rights work in his country, as well as also within the Asian Human Rights Commission. So he will speak about the same theme, about the impunity and the resulting consequences into poverty and other problems like the inability to find solutions to COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. Basil. I would also like to thank the Meditate Memorial Foundation for this opportunity. Mr. Basil, so once again, my name is Mohara, and I am a staff member of the Asian Human Rights Commission. In order to discuss the issue of poverty and impunity, we can focus on the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on the people in Nepal.
The voice is not clear.
We can't hear.
You can't hear me?
No, it's not clear and we can't hear.
Maybe your microphone. Eh?
One second, sir. Hello? Can you hear me now, Chris?
Yeah, now it's clear. Please.
Yeah, okay. Sure, then I'll put it like this. Yeah, last week, Nepal reported almost 7,316 new cases and like 145 COVID-19 related deaths, even like it was the data from May 16. And if you go back to May 13, it is 8,842 cases. Also, almost like 225 cases are there. And if you go to this 11th May, the cases were 9,127, and this new cases, the deaths are 139. So the number of active cases stands over 100,000 currently. These are the statistics provided by the government and picked up from the media. Without any doubt, one can easily guess that exact numbers are much more than this. The situation has drastically changed overnight in Nepal. The healthcare system is in the verge of collapse. Patients and the family members are begging for help. They are begging for the best and running around from the hospital to hospital seeking it. Very few are getting the hospital beds and the treatment. The COVID-19 infected are laying around hospitals seeking treatment, and most of them, what they need is they only need oxygen. They don't need anything else. They are not looking for the ICU bed. They are not looking for the high class treatment, but they are merely looking for the oxygen. And Nepalese are dying due to lack of oxygen. See, there is something deeply wrong in here. Doctors are giving up, and already they are pleading for help. They are using social media, asking for the government to provide oxygen. Even many doctors and nurses who are themselves infected have been forgetting about their conditions and are getting treating other COVID-19 patients. They are the true angels for some handful of lucky Nepalese. Yes, Mr. Basil.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. And people are not even getting the basic facility of the oxygen. So now,
Speak next.
Yeah. So now,
next. Yes.
So, yeah. Now coming back to the state, where is the government? Where is the government facility and mechanism? Looking at the current stance of this and look at the lack of governance has been exposed to its fullest. And what was the government doing for the last 1 year? The answer is that it was playing political musical chairs. It was embroiled into dirty politics and tried to hold on this position. The KP Sharma-led government, which is a Maoist government, was busy claiming that the COVID-19 pandemic was merely a viral influenza and suggested that sneeze and also advised to drink lukewarm turmeric water as a domestic remedy. So instead of building oxygen plants, instead of investigating in increasing hospital beds, instead of making makeshift hospitals, instead of making isolation centers at the local level, and instead of even purchasing and securing COVID-19 vaccine, the government spent time and money on building view towers, making idols of Hindu goddesses and goddesses, telling Lord Parvati will save us all. Even instead of providing oxygen cylinder to hospital the patient, what was the government doing? The government minister, they were found hoarding cylinders at their homes. So what is this? Good governance at the height of stupidity? When people are dying due to lack of oxygen and hospital beds, the Ministry of Health has been busy issuing statements warning doctors and nurses not to scare the public by telling that they do not have any further capacity to admit new patients and they do not have any oxygen left. This is the arrogance of the government, which pretends that all is well in Nepal and that there is no COVID-19 emergency. So the videos and pictures of COVID-19 days and cries for pleadings and help must be dramas played by commonly, please. Because you can see it, you can see the social media, you can see the newspaper, you can see people are just pleading, crying for help, and they are not getting. And here the main part is this, and surprisingly, the civil society who were very vocal and also very active a year ago, and they are very silent this year. They may be helpless and trying to protect themselves and their families first, or they may be trying to protect themselves from the wrath of the state, and they know that the government or Nepalese version of Nero is enjoying this and still claiming that all is well and everything is under control. Now, I think it is time for the civil society to wake up and advocate, protest, and also the authoritarian KP Sharma Oli government, who is not a prime minister, but merely a propagandist. Here, I would like to borrow the famous word by also Arundhati Roy, a famous author, that what is going on in Nepal and what is going on in India, like what is going on in Nepal, this is a crime against humanity. And it is true, when people are dying because of that lack of oxygen, it is indeed a crime against humanity, and maybe more than that. The only responsible is the state and the government. The role of the state and the so-called institution are seriously in question. So with this, I would like to stop my presentation. So may the spirit of may give the power to victims and their families. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Basil.
Okay, we will get back to some questions to you later.
Sure, Mr. Basil.
In terms of what you said. So I will make a short presentation on Sri Lanka. What we are basically trying to say is that there is a massive humanitarian and human rights crisis going on. A crisis that is going on in a country. Although the COVID-19 is the manifestation, COVID-19 is not just a problem of a virus. The viruses and all these problems are there, but some countries have relatively overcome that. Relatively, it's not a kind of problem that you can overcome completely. But if your form of management of governance is strong enough, you can contain the problem. The conclusion we derive is that the failure to contain this virus and going into a large-scale deaths is a result of a management failure. And the management failure is a result of something much more long-lasting than the virus. That is our structure of governance. That is our law enforcement capacity and the will to enforce the law through mechanisms of justice. The policing, the prosecutorial systems, judicial system have failed. So a failed system of justice is preventing the capacity of the nation to react to a crisis. And if we do not make this link, we will not make big contribution to this virus resolving problem or to the future. We know that at the time in Europe, when, for example, the Jewish people were sent into gas chambers, nobody did anything. When the war was over, when 6 million people have died, when the sheer inhumanity is manifested in the whatever their bodies that were left, starved bodies of millions of people, then for some time the international community talked about a little bit, and then we go on for till wait the next crisis. In 1975 to 1979, entirety of Cambodian people went through a tremendous crisis where almost 1/7 part of their population was killed by the Pol Pot regime. Out of about 7 million people, over 1 million people were killed, and the world did nothing. And afterwards, then everybody is shocked and say that we will have a peace mission, we will have this and that, but the damage is done, and the damage continue up to now. We are telling the world today that in South Asia and Southeast Asia, such a huge crisis is taking place, and the world is not responding. I'm not saying that world is not doing enough regarding the COVID problem. WHO is doing their utmost to help in doing whatever they can to provide with advice about the knowledge about the problem, expertise, the various encouraging other people to give various support like cylinders for gas, or face masks, or injections and things like that. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the entire human rights network, having failed to contribute to developing accountable government through functioning systems of justice, allowing bad policing to go on and on and on to make a nightmare out of the life of people, to allow the judicial freedoms to be trampled like anything. Virtually some countries there is no independent judiciary. Some countries what they had, they have lost. So you can do whatever with you like with them. You can kill them. You can send them to a prison under various national security laws. You can kill journalists. If worse come to worse, you can make people disappear. But what is the international community's will to get engaged on these issues? But we cannot ignore. To ignore is to see more deaths. And unfortunately, if 6 months back, some serious efforts were made, those about 400 or more people who are dying in India today, each day, would not be dying. I'm not saying that it could have been completely overcome. No, like other countries, they could have contained the problem. But the system doesn't exist. Accountable governance does not exist. And then the people have to cry out and say, we are dying. Arundhati Roy, that was a main message to the Guardian, London Guardian paper. We are dying. And nobody hears. There is something wrong in the way we have been doing human rights globally and also in our civil societies. In civil societies, we learn to imitate whatever the Western groups were saying, but they didn't have this kind of problems. Their systems of governance has been established some centuries ago. For example, South Korea does not have this problem at the moment because within the last 20, 30 years, the system has been built. Of course, there will be crises, but there is a system to deal with the crisis. But these other countries do not have a systems to deal with crisis. And this has not become a major concern for the human rights groups, international human rights groups, even for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and treaty bodies and all this. They are still living in an old mode. We are not saying they are bad people. They are very good people. They are very honorable people. They are very dedicated people. But they don't understand another world. The world in which these things are happening. The same way they did not understand what was happening to the Jews. They did not understand what was happening to the Cambodian people because they are far distant from those realities. If you are growing up in an affluent country, you can't understand a poor country. That's a fact. That is not anything wrong because you don't know what it is. You don't know what it is for a mother to be unable to be feeding the child. You don't know what it means to have your husband arrested for nothing and the police station, they beat them up and kill them. So for the rest of your life, you have to look after your children and face all the other problems. These things don't happen regularly in more affluent countries. So the people from the affluent countries, they don't open up their eyes to see this is what is happening. And if you do human rights means that in order to help the people to overcome these problems, how could they know this? It is only by engaging with local people who know the problems. Any average local person know everything that these speakers told you earlier. For average ordinary poor man, these are not new information. That they are poor is no new information. That their policemen are brutes, looking for a bribe all the time. That is not new information. That many judges take bribes is not new information. That you can be put into jail for nothing is not new information. But how is it that some people know these things, some other people don't know it? And that is the problem of human rights today. We must have a common knowledge about far deeper problems. And unless we cultivate that knowledge, it won't come. Knowledge doesn't come from the trees. If you grow and develop yourself in a developed country, this knowledge will never come to you unless you get yourself connected to people who have those problems and you do care. You care that not only your problem, but these people also must have their own history. Suppose in the 1980s and the earlier period, world said, what happens to South Korea, we don't care. Suppose those boys, the young people who faced the bullets on 1980, told themselves, we are young, we have future, let's forget about this, and whatever happens to others, we don't care and we look after ourselves. What would have happened? Would there have been a South Korea of today? You know, those boys and those young people who gave their lives, they were serious about human rights. They were serious about democracy. They were serious about human decency. Today, we have all kinds of human rights activists. We are not serious. We will not, letting alone give our lives for these things. We don't have even certain time to find out what is happening. So this big problem should be faced if we are to honor those people who died in Gwangju. Otherwise, we are merely paying lip service and making heroes out of them. Those who die for great causes don't want to be recognized as heroes. They want their life ideals to carry on. That is what they are looking for. If their life, if the ideals for which they gave their life is continued, then you honor them. If those ideals are abandoned, and once a year we pay some lip service, that is not the way to honor a great debt. These people who gave their life in Gwangju as well as elsewhere in Korea were great lives. Their contribution was for history, for the future of the future people to come. They have nothing for them to gain. You die. They knew that. And the people who were there, foreign journalists, just the day before when the Korean military shot these 180 or more people, they had a meeting with them. During the meeting, these journalists have written later, those people were very sure that for more than a few hours they will not live anymore. They had a choice: walk out of it and live. But they decided to stay and die because they had a belief that that will awaken the minds of others. And in fact, it happened. And South Korea's pride should be that. And this occasion should be used in order to help dying nations, virtually dying nations, and people who are dying like flies about the COVID. But even without COVID, people who live most miserable lives under most miserable governments. Now, human rights movement was there to help in these things. We should question and try to bring back to the original ideals of human rights and democracy. That is my short thing, but based on the observations I have on Sri Lanka, which is a dying nation democratically. I'm telling you very seriously, it's a democratically a dying nation. The civilization is leaving that country. There is management has fallen to the lowest. We are one of the most indebted countries, and the parts of the country will be taken over by other people because we cannot pay debts. Why? Because we mismanage our economies. Why did we mismanage? Because we don't have the systems of control, system of transparency, and systems of accountability. And from the point of view of those who work for human rights, they have not done enough to expose bad policing, bad prosecutions, bad judiciary is bad for the nation. It's bad for the nation. If you have a judiciary that is bad for the nation, if you have a policing system which is bad for the nation, if you have a prosecution system that is bad for the nation, what do you rely on? And that's the kind of problem that is faced in South Asia, and it gets manifest in a sharpest way with militarization, like in Myanmar and in Thailand. Myanmar, the military had killed that nation from 1962. With huge effort, people were trying to awaken. And then once again, in spite of all the people's wish, the elected government was defeated and people have been killed like flies. I think about 780 people within such a short time, and 1,000 others in jail. Now that's the world that we are talking about. But that realization should be brought into the human rights movement. I hope this Gwangju event, in that this theme will vibrate these themes will dominate the discussions of this year on the May 18th. So now we have more time to go directly to some questions to each of the speakers. And if you have any questions, you can also send it by email. And I hope the Korean our counterparts there in Gwangju will transmit the questions to us, or anybody can ask direct. So the first question that I'm posing to is to the Nepal. You said that even the minimum of minimum need for cylinders is not there. Is it also true that if anybody were to give these cylinders, your government has no capacity to receive and to use them immediately? Is it correct or wrong?
Yes, this is correct, Mr. Basil. I think what has happened is we have like very few cylinders, and we have the oxygen, but we don't have the cylinders. So now India like is already in trouble. So what we have, the government has done is government request China to provide some cylinders, and China has agreed to give us around 20,000 like cylinders to Nepal. But the problem is it has already given, it's already in the go down in China, but Nepal do not have that capacity to go and bring that all 20,000 even during that emergency. So last week only one flight went to Beijing, and we have we got around 500 cylinders to Nepal. So still 19,500 cylinders are still in China, already given to Nepal. The capacity wise, the government do not have that capacity to bring even the assistance that has been provided to Nepal. And the another part, there is another part also, like the bulb in the Chinese cylinder is a very different one than the available one in Nepal. So when we even that 500, we are in trouble how to go, we are going to use it. And on top of that, the 500 cylinder came to Nepal, but out of that also many has been taken, not given to the hospitals and the patient, but taken by the ministers, and it was found in their home. So even if we have we receive the let's say assistance, we do not have that kind of mechanism and to like bring it and give it to the people. Yes, Mr. Basil.
So the cylinders, the apart from cylinders, in normal time before this COVID, do you have a good enough healthcare system in the country?
No, sir. Like this is the main part. Like when we are talking about the institutions, when you are even talking about like let's say police, judiciary, that's a different part. But even when you are talking about the health system, it is not there. So people are like the system is very limited, and also like there are private hospitals, the government one, even we do not have the medicines. When we are talking about paracetamols, that kind of thing, we do not have it. And the facilities, because if someone gets sick in like a faraway geography, in order to not in the hospital, in order to reach a health force, they have to walk for 2 days. They have to walk for 3 days. And there are no ambulances because of the geography. Even people has to carry them at the back and bring the travel, walk for 2 days just to reach the healthcare system. When this is the, so it's not the healthcare, there is non-existence of the healthcare system.
So has there been in the civil society organizations in the past? I'm not telling just now because I can understand that in the midst of COVID, everybody's, what they can do is limited. But prior to that, was there in the civil society movement a strong movement demanding a better healthcare system?
It is not in the civil society, like thank you for the question. It is not in the major civil society. Major civil society has been busy with like something more than the healthcare system. But like some of the doctors, like we have like we have one doctor who have been raising, and then now civil societies like has been supporting that doctor, who is a doctor with a government hospital, but he has been trying to see that at least we have 7 provinces, and the 7 provinces, there should be the health facility, there should be building, and also not only limited to the city provinces, but in the village level, there should be the hospitals open, and there should be access of the public. They don't have to travel all the way to the capital, to Kathmandu, to cities to get the treatment. And also to increase the number of the teaching hospitals, and where even for the medical students to go, and the government. But the government he have went into the hunger strike for more than 19 times now. What the government and the hunger strike means is he has given the so the government comes and sit with him, assign something after 12 days, after 20 days, after 19 days, then but after that they don't follow the agreement with this limited. It's a small team of the civil society working on the bettering the healthcare system, access of the healthcare system to general public, and also the education. That it's almost like you have to spend more than 6 million rupees just to be a doctor. And so they are saying it should be the government should give a subsidy, and then it should be decreased so that we produce more doctors as well as the nurses, that kind of thing. Yeah, there is a small fraction of the civil society which has started some years ago, not from the very beginning. So
I open that question also to the others. In your country, are you satisfied of the work of particularly the civil society organizations to improve your healthcare system? Are you happy about it? Or if so, why? And if you are not, can you explain what is really been the contribution? Because without public opinion demanding something, it will never happen. Doctors can contribute, that's very good. If the doctors are contributing, then the people must support those doctors. Otherwise, they got isolated. They won't be heard. But is there enough done to within the other 2 countries in order to support greater measures for better healthcare system? Zaman?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mr. Basil. The question is very important, and let me give an example that how it works in Bangladesh. Last year, after COVID-19 virus was first found in the country, and within the 2 months' time, there were reports that people were dying without oxygen and ventilator facilities in the country. So UNICEF made arrangement through securing fund from World Bank and another international institution to supply certain number of ventilators to provide the oxygen facilities. So 300 ventilators were procured, and that arrived in Bangladesh about 11 months ago from today. So what the government did, the equipments arrived and it is left at the international airport of the country for 11 months. The report came in mid-April this year. So it said 10 months. So now 1 more month has passed. So this is, and on the other hand, people are still dying without appropriate amount of oxygen and ventilator facilities. And at the same time, the government was purchasing the same kind of equipments in an inflated price.
Zaman, the question that I pose to you is, are you happy with what the civil society has been doing in order to have a better healthcare system?
No, the civil society literally doesn't have any constructive role in Bangladesh for the healthcare system. Everybody is, when somebody is getting affected, they are trying to find their own political and bureaucratic channel to get their things done, but at the same time for the national need of a very, effective and caring healthcare system, they are not speaking out enough. And the people, some of the independent individuals and activists who raised their voice using some social media platform, they have been detained under the Digital Security Act and other kinds of repressive legislations of the country. So the government used that also to, silence the dissidents who raised the voice. But the large segment, the most powerful segment of the civil society, they keep silence.
So that's a big problem in the civil society itself. Because their role of making public opinion in order to get the basics for people, like the healthcare, that task nobody's doing. Okay, we go into Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Basil. In my point of view, and also based on my observation in Indonesia, yeah, of course, in the beginning, when the COVID-19 hit Indonesia, we have very serious problem. Our health system didn't, let's say, ready at all at the time, because in the history of Indonesia, I think we don't have any experience how to deal with the pandemic, unless pandemic.
So if you go beyond the pandemic,
yeah,
to the general situation of the healthcare system.
If you ask me whether or not I'm happy with the healthcare system until now, well, of course I'm not happy, even though the government try to, to make the healthcare system much better, and also now we have some isolation center in Jakarta and also other provinces. We have isolation center, but the thing that make Indonesia difference with the, I don't know, with the other countries, yeah, I would like to say that we have strong role of civil society. The point that I would like to say is that civil society very creative during the pandemic. For instance, like the charitable organization and also human rights organization, they collect public donations, they collect public support to, to purchase like the, the special, how do we call it, that one, the APD, to the doctor and also to the paramedics, especially in the remote area, especially in the hospital who really needs support, because the government doesn't have enough capacity to support, to provide, let's say, like the special dress, APD. Even at the time, face mask is also very difficult. So that's why civil society, charitable organization, philanthropy, even the religions organizations, religions leader, community leader, very active, even until now actually in Indonesia. Not only support the doctor, but also support the poor people, the below middle class, and also the people who dismissed from their job. They also support the disabled group who are very, let's say, like very vulnerable in these conditions. So very dynamic actually, Mr. Basil, in Indonesia, for the civil society, media as well.
So what you are saying really is that there is a community support.
Yes, community support. Not only organization, but also community with their various backgrounds.
Now, how about the places like, especially difficult places like Aceh?
Aceh, well, I have communication with the local TRC there. In this forum also we have Indria Fernida. I think she knows very well as well the situation in Aceh. Well, in Aceh, according to the TRC, they said that during the pandemic, mostly victim and family of victims, they are suffering from economic problem, yeah. Because according to TRC, they mostly victim working on informal sector. and also small scale agriculture. So during the pandemic, they don't have enough, let's say, like chance to sell their products, to let's say like gain order from the market, because some of them have home industrial like tailor, and also selling food and some handicraft like that. So they are very much affected, and they are very much suffer in this kind of condition. Even in Aceh, in Papua as well, and some other provinces, I also try to communicate with some local networks. They told us that small scale farmers, small scale fishermen, they are suffering a lot from this situation. And also the labor during the pandemic, the factories, many factories closed, and many labor dismissed from the job. So this is situation in Indonesia. But in terms of civil society, I think I am happy with the role of civil society in Indonesia, and they are very active support, because the civil society aware that the government doesn't have enough capacity to handle all of the problems during the COVID-19 times.
Yeah. Now, actually, my question was not the COVID time, because that we can understand that's a massive problem suddenly coming. In normal times, say for example, one time under Suharto, there was the global claim that Indonesia is one of the tigers. The great countries, that develop suddenly develop. Now, other countries which have developed that time, they develop a very strong hospitalized system. Say, even if you take Thailand has a very highly developed medical care system. Can you compare that kind of situation with your country medical care system?
Compared to the current situation, you mean?
Not the current. Normally, you compare it with neighboring countries, some of the neighboring countries, where they have developed their hospital systems, their medical training systems, over a long period, and they have come up to a certain standards. Now, will Indonesian system compare with that?
Well, if we compare with the Singapore, one of the most developed country in the region, even in Asia, I think Indonesia is far behind, the health care system. But if we compare to the, let's say like Philippines or maybe Thailand, I think it's still equal, even to Malaysia, I think even to Malaysia has a bit, progress in terms of dealing with the COVID-19. I think now in Malaysia, situation is also worsening, since the new variant of COVID-19 also hit the Malaysian country now. So I think they are now facing, let's say like potential the collapse of health care system as well. Indonesia as well, I think. If I compare, we are equal with the Philippines, Malaysia, even Thailand, but it is not enough, Mr. Basil. It is not enough.
If we get back to the main theme, that is the question of impunity. Now, what is your view of the quality of the policing system in your country? Zaman?
The quality of policing system in Bangladesh is the worst. According to my experience of this country. And why I say that? Because the police doesn't have any form of transparent accountability. They enjoy blanket impunity, and they are extremely corrupt. And at the same time, it's extremely torturous system. torture is the norm of policing for everything they do on a daily basis, whether it's registration of a complaint or crime investigation or getting evidence or collecting evidence. For everything, it's torture and bribery. So these are inseparable from each other and the police. And it's institutionally corrupt. It's not that individual police, one person, two person do that, because the system is such that if somebody who extorts bribe on the ground, it comes to 300 kilometers away at the headquarters, so the higher officials, because the system is such. So that's why in Asian Human Rights Commission, we have in our previous reports, we said that it's a chain of corruption that, that we see in the Bangladeshi policing system. So with that system also, the other part is that the judiciary, particularly the magistracy, where all the gross human rights abuses have taken place and where the people should be receiving remedies from and protection from human rights violations. So the police dominate the magisterial system. So whatever the police want, the magistrates, they basically vet it and grant it. So the victims become totally defenseless and the police remain completely out of any form of accountability. So it's an overall system that we need to see, that police doesn't do it individually. If they get it with the support of institutions which have legally authorized to hold the police the perpetrators accountable. So the system is, the police is not only bad alone, it's the entire criminal justice system that is a part of the reality what the people suffer there.
What happens to any reformer who will say that either the policing system should be improved or the political system should have changes, or that say poverty problems should be addressed, or try to form a trade union? What will happen to them?
It depends on the situation. For example, who is saying it? If a very influential person is saying it, having good relationship with the government, the person will be okay. If an independent trade union activist or human rights activist say it in a public platform from a critical perspective, then the person may face various kinds of consequences, at least constant surveillance, and subsequently there might be other kind of harassment against the person. Forming
How
trade
often
union,
does the disappearances take place?
of course, there are hundreds of disappearances have taken place. Documented cases are about 600, but undocumented cases, many families who still do not have the courage to say it in public with their names and the authentic information. So that number is few times higher than the documented cases. And also the people who criticize, they face a larger scale extrajudicial execution from the activists, that if they criticize the law enforcement system particularly. And forming trade union is also a difficult job if somebody takes an independent position to do the trade union for its true objectives. But at the same time, there are trade unions that they become extended hand of some of the powerful elites of the groups, then they normally don't have a problem. So in the condition of Bangladesh, it's subjective, depending on the identity of the person and the relationship of the people who are talking about what. So, and who may be the target of the criticism or the approach that they are making and the initiatives they are taking. So depending on that, there will be consequences.
Are you happy with whatever the UN High Commissioner's Office and the international human rights organizations have done in order to deal with the very acute human rights problems in your country?
With all due respects to the UN human rights institutions and the Office of the High Commissioners and Special Procedures, they are doing to some extent certain things, which is good, I would say. But if I look at the reality and the requirement in terms of the reality, then I am very much unhappy with what they have been doing, because they are not coming to the ground that what is really the problem. And the way that particularly the UN experts are talking about the problem is asking the government to investigate, prosecute, and punish. That is mostly all the recommendations and in all their statements that they make in public and they communicate with the government. That is the essence of the message. So that is not helpful. Why I say that? Because the government has made these problems like extrajudicial executions, enforced disappearances, torture, these are institutionalized problems. The government has very deliberately chosen these to silence the society, to create fear psychosis in the country so that people don't speak out. And when the UN experts, having all the vast experience about human rights and knowledge about the issues, when they ask the same government just to investigate without they doing something which may lead to investigations, which may lead to collecting evidences regarding the crimes being committed by the states, agencies and some of the non-state agencies under the protection of the state agencies. So it is completely helpless and useless, I would say, with all due respect, because the police doesn't have the capability to investigate something credibly, when the crimes are being committed by their colleagues or they themselves, like Rapid Action Battalion, which is a force is globally known to be the death squad of the government. So they have impunity to some extent that no police station will register a complaint against the Rapid Action Battalion if the Rapid Action Battalion officers abduct somebody and disappear somebody. So all the disappearance cases, the police dictate the complainants, the victims' families to alter their complaint, removing the name of the perpetrators, the name of the agency, state agency, which were, according to the witness, responsible for disappearing the victim. So in that context, if the UN fails to understand this reality and they don't revise their way of intervention, then that system is not going to help the victim, and it is also not going to help the improvement of the institutions.
Do you feel that the international human rights organization, the big organizations, they really understand the kind of acute problems that you are faced with in your country?
That is, I think there are many don't, of course, because of their background. And some are now, I see there is some opening up among few organizations that trying to learn about it and also trying to come up with a little bit closer to appropriate language and understanding. But I think it is still not enough. But what is, for example, to be honest, we faced that when we say that the judicial institutions are dysfunctional and collapsed, so many organizations, big organizations, they had objections about that. This is, they find it that we should, are we human rights organizations in a position to say that? So, I mean, what I feel that according to the experience of the victims and the human rights activists in that country, that if the judiciary doesn't function well, for example, there are hundreds of enforced disappearances have taken place. To my knowledge, there have been over a dozen habeas corpus cases that was brought to the High Court. Not a single case the High Court has assertively ordered the authorities to bring the body before the court.
Okay, Zaman, we will also take up some other countries. Now, in Indonesia, there is this detention for 60 days within the police without people being produced before a court. As far as I know, in any free country, this is one of the most big exceptions. Now, regarding this matter, do you believe that enough work is being done, both at government level as well as international levels, in order to establish the right of people to be brought before a court as soon as possible?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Basil. Yes, in terms of police, police reform, yes, I do agree that it is priority work actually in Indonesia, even though since political reform 1998, the government, the transitional government, and also civil society has set up, let's say, like serious blueprint how to reform the police. And in 2002, it is one of the big reform of the police when the police being spared from the military at the time. But what happened? Even though the police already spread from the military, the legacy, the culture, and also the doctrine of the police, I think, is still still influenced by Suharto at the time, the military culture. That's why the police still involved in many cases of violence. And Mr. Basil mentioned about the procedure of criminal code. Yes, since 1981 until now, we still apply the same criminal procedure, which provide authority to the police to detain suspect who charge minimum 5 years. The police has authority to detain. The first step to detain 20 days. Then, if the police need further investigation and need more evidence to complete the administration of the criminal case, then the police can request to the attorney to add 40 days. So in total, the police has authority, including the permit from the attorney, 60 days, 20 days plus 40 days. So what happened during the detention in the police custody? I will put some examples here. For instance, like the data of the National Commission on Human Rights in the last year, in 2020, the National Commission on Human Rights stated in the report that the most state apparatus who commit crimes, who committed or allegedly involved in the violence and also torture is the police. The National Commission wrote 150 cases violence and torture committed by the police last year. This is the case that register. I don't know the case outside this number. Because last year the National Commission on Human Rights received 751 cases which committed by the state apparatus, including military, and then the officer of the prison, and then the civil service police unit, etc., including the police. The police is 150, and some other report produced by civil society like Contrast, and then the Jakarta Legal Aid, the Legal Aid Foundation as well. They also mentioned that the police still involved in the violence, torture, and the case that I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, the police in Kalimantan police office tortured to death suspect who stole a mobile phone from the shop. So it's still happening in Indonesia. We need serious reform because the penal code that we use, the penal code procedure, is still the same with apply under Suharto regime at the time. Actually,
okay, Chris, Now, if there is any questions from anybody in the audience, please feel to ask that, because we have only 8 minutes to go before we sum up. Anybody is free to ask any questions as we go along. I don't want to keep waiting till questions are asked, because then we'll be wasting time. So please feel to indicate and ask any questions you wish. From the point of view of Nepal, Prakash, now the UN Human Rights Committee has made a very long list of recommendations in terms of their cases about what the government should do to improve the system. Has any of these being implemented?
Yes, Mr. Officer, thank you for the question. Of course, the UN Human Rights Committee has given their views on 26 cases so far. And from
how many cases?
26
cases, yeah.
And in detail about those cases, but the government, they have not given any replies, or they have not implemented the recommendations. So usually what happens during the UPR, they say that, yeah, we'll try to follow up, we are working on this, but they have not fulfilled those recommendations, especially regarding the cases like providing justice, that kind of thing. Also, even like the registering cases, those has not been maintained. But the civil society, of course, and even like last time also, civil society, they have been raising this issue and trying to lobby people for the government at least to respond to those cases, but it hasn't happened so far.
Okay, any if there is any of you want to make any other comment, or any three out of three of you? If not, I think you have said what you wanted. So we try to sum up. This is the occasion where we try to commemorate people who thought it is better to die than to live in a country where there is no democracy and there is no respect for human liberty and human person. That is what we are celebrating. Not an abstract event, not as events few centuries back, but something that happened in 1980. Now, you cannot celebrate an event like that by mere ceremonies. It must be a moment where we ask ourselves, if we were in that position, if we were among those about 180 people who had to decide whether to surrender to the military within few hours or to die within few hours. That was the only choice, to be or not to be. That was all the choice they had. And then they decided, no, for the future, for our country, for the world, it is better that we die rather than surrender to oppression and violators of human rights. If we live, we must live with dignity. If we can't live with dignity, then we have to find a way to assert our dignity by our death. Now, that was the kind of spirit with which spirit that we are celebrating. Can we ask ourselves whether we have at least 10% of that determination? At least a little bit of that determination? Or have all this human rights work, have all this celebration become just rituals, where we pay some lip service and we have become blind to people who are dying in their countries, who have been living the same way as South Koreans used to live under the military dictatorship, people who are in jails, people who are tortured, people who could not speak, people could not in any way to say that what was done is wrong, where we had no chance to say what you are doing is wrong. If a soldier kills another, people had no chance of saying, hey, what you are doing is wrong, stop it. And now it is happening. It is going to be happening many times. COVID only aggravated the problem. And these COVID times are merely a manifestation of seriously affected nations, people who cannot live up to express their dignity, people who have to suppress their dignity to survive, people who had to, be quiet and hide themselves under their whatever to just to survive. Children go in that atmosphere. And we may amuse ourselves with all kinds of entertainment. A world of, a world that denies everything to us is giving us only one thing: all kinds of entertainment, particularly through virtual media. If you want to live a life of amusement, there's plenty of it, even if you're hungry. So let's take that message and at least ask yourself one question: am I having a right to say that I'm also loyal to those who thought that making a sacrifice for democracy is worthwhile? So thank you very much for listening. I hope your meetings will go on successful and something will come out of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Basil. Thank you, everyone.
Very much.
Bye-bye.
All the audience.